A Nigerian man, if he comes in here and speak, you won't doubt that this man has got confidence.
Sup everyone, you're welcome back to more Bespoke. 2 days ago we started out on our quest to make the patterns for this pair of loafers. We designed everything on the last itself. Today we actually get to make the pattern of the loafers, but there's no time to waste, so let's get back to where we left off. So the first thing we do after the designing of all of the pattern parts is to peel out all of these useless parts, and then we will go ahead and straight away cut along the middle of the center line and then peel out the design from both sides of the last. Remember, we said the inside part is the medial side and the outside part is the lateral side. So we peel them out, flatten them out on a piece of cardboard, and then we will begin to do what is called the mean form. Now, those of you who really get put off when I talk about mean forms, you don't have to do a mean form, especially if the last that you're using is this type that is really not very steep. But like I said, I have cut out both parts, so I mark them appropriately. This is the medial side, the inside part. I cut the notch around the vamp point and the balls, the instep, you remember, and of course at the counterpoint. So I'll basically just take this medial side, the inside part, trace it out on top of a piece of white cardboard, trace it out, and then I will take the lateral side, align the tip of the back center line to the tip of the front center line, and then trace out this lateral side on top of the outline that I had made from the medial side. Thereafter, I'll simply just find the differential between these two outlines. In the meantime, let me add the ball of the outside part. And then, like I said, the differential, which is the middle in between the outlines around the center line area, it basically corresponds around the back. Now, there's also a differential between the vamp lines, so I take the middle. I don't have to find the differential for the underside since it is going underneath the shoe in any case. So I'll just take the longer of the two lines. Having done that, I'll cut out the outline, cutting along the differentials around the center line, like I mentioned. And this that I have here is what we know as the mean form. On a last like this, which has gentle curves, it basically corresponds with mostly the lateral side. So you can get away with not using a mean form in the case of a last that has gentle curves around the center line. But I trace out my mean form on top of a clear piece of paper and place the design that I had made earlier on my lateral side and use my roller marker to just trace in the design lines. If you don't own a roller marker, you can actually use an awl. If you don't own a roller marker, you basically can use an awl to just punch in your design lines. Make sure that you mark that intersection point. You actually outline it clearly so that when you remove it, it is very, what's the word? It has some prominent features so that you know at what point to start placing your apron on top of the rest of your pattern. So I went ahead and punched the stitching holes for the apron. I shouldn't have done that because I'm still going to design this apron after I have sprung the vamp of these loafers, but I did it, so we'll just leave with it. So having, traced out all of those design lines, I basically connect dots and mark in all the design lines. Remember, I keep mentioning make that intersection point very prominent. Next thing is to convert the curves of this the center line into an angle. So I draw a line from the vamp point to the instep. I had earlier drawn one from the vamp point towards the tip. Next thing that we need to do is to spring it, which is basically to straighten the center line on that curve. To do that, I'll first of all draw a line right angle to the top line, but from that intersection point, I'll extend that line to the tongue. And then this is my vamp line, which I will cut open and spread its legs by about 5 mm. So I have cut open my vamp line, but before I can spread out my vamp line, let me count the holes that I had when I initially designed the apron. So I counted a total of 18 or 19 holes if you count the center. Then I'll cut out the outline of the entire pattern. I mentioned that I was going to spread out my vamp line by about 5 mm. That's just what I have done. Then I'll cut out the entire pattern. Now to spring this pattern, take note of the tip of the last, which we marked in on the last itself. So I'll place that tip on the center line, and then the point that I generated when I drew that right angle line earlier, that will be the second line on the center line. Then I'll draw all of the parts of this loafers up until I get to this intersection point. Using this intersection point as pivot, I'll basically pivot the tongue down to the center line and draw in the rest of the pattern. So you see that I have straightened out that curve that we had. I have straightened it out on the center line, and I can basically add in my lasting allowance and then add about 1 mm at the back to factor in for the space that I need for my backstay. So I'll cut out the fully sprung pattern, basically just cut everything out. And ladies and gentlemen, the pattern is done. By the time I cut out this part, you will see that my pattern has been adequately duplicated, and I can basically just go ahead and punch in the holes. Before I punch in the holes, I want to redesign the apron since it is no longer on a curve but now on a straight line. Basically, I find the beginning point as I had on my design, draw a right angle from that point, mark in 1/16 of the last length, which is about 2.1 cm, and then draw a line from this point to there and curve this line in, just the way we designed the apron when we did it on the last. Next thing that I'm going to do hereafter is to, since we used 7 mm as the spacing for the stitching holes, I'll simply just add 7 mm along that line, which I can basically mark out after I have done all of it. Then I also not forget to duplicate the bow. So I'll go ahead and duplicate the bow, not forgetting to add the stitching holes on the bow itself. As you can see, I have added some kind of design to the bow, which you can choose to do. And ladies and gentlemen, by the time you spread it out, you find that your pattern is ready. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the entire process for creating this pattern. I thank you for watching. God bless you. On the next video, we will start creating the shoe itself. See you in that class.